Last time on Sonic the Hedgehog. The war between the Mobian freedom fighters and the evil tyrannical overlord Dr. Robotnik rages on, as many adventures and tales of bravery, sacrifice, loyalty, and family test our heroes' mental and physical capabilities. The freedom fighters continue to preserve their home from being taken. However, the flames of war only escalated as the blue hero of the noble freedom fighters was inadvertently converted into the most powerful, mechanized Robian known to many as Mecha Sonic. With the help of the loyal, silent, and powerful Knuckles the Echidna, Sonic was free from his chains, only to be put back in said chains after being accused of intentionally turning himself into a mechanical menace. With his tenacity, Sonic tracked down the fanged weasel responsible for his kidnapping, which then brings us to issue 41 that will soon enough follow into today's story. Princess Sally Acorn, leader of the Freedom Fighters, lost her father when he was banished to the Zone of Silence by Dr. Robotnik. But after stealing a convenient piece of technology for the Freedom Fighters' engineer to install into a star post, Sonic, Sally, and freelance agent Jeffrey St. John set out to bring the king back from his demented prison. The mission was a success, but now something terrible has happened to the king. Starting today, we begin the Sonic Quest story.
Hello my lovely viewers of the World Wide Web, welcome back to the Summer of Marathons, and guess what? More comic books!
Jesus, how long has it been since I last reviewed the Sonic comics? In fact, when was the last time I reviewed any comic? I realize this was long overdue, but I hope you guys can understand, a lot of personal stuff has kept me from getting around to reading these and reviewing them for you, and I just didn't want to rush it out if I wasn't happy with what I wanted to talk about. But my word is loyalty, and today I am granting you, the audience of the previous story arc, your wish. Today, we take a look at Archie Comics' introduction to the most powerful machine ever created by Dr. Robotnik, the Death Egg Space Station. I'm gonna be honest, looking for this spin-off comic was not easy. They're not very common to come by in singles, and trying to find them in bundled Sonic comics like the Sonic Select series, pretty damn hard honestly. And after reading this story and taking down notes for it, I have to say, even though I would have been happy to talk about this story, I don't know why it was so heavily requested in the first place. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm more than grateful that you guys wanted me to talk about this, but man, was this one of the biggest letdowns for me in quite a while. For a story arc about one of the greatest weapons ever built in the Sonic mythos, I honestly thought we were going to get something bigger and more threatening, and just to summarize this one video in one paragraph, in case you guys just want to get a brief thought from myself of what I think about Sonic Quest, it has promise and a good idea about what it wants to do with its main focus, but it leaves a lot to be desired with a disappointing climax and an overall dull story. But how about we look at that story as a whole and go over what's good and bad, and hopefully I can give you guys a good idea of why I'm not impressed with this particular set of issues. Our story begins with the summoning of Jeffrey St. John, and despite the fact that this guy poses no threat, Sonic decides to attack the fucker outright.
Don't you just love it when a random conflict is motivated by a random, obscure, and vague concept?
Seriously, outside of the stupid love triangle that these guys share with Sally, this bickering just comes out of nowhere. Like, yeah, I get it, there's a form of rivalry and characters sometimes need to have rivals to develop their sense of strength, self-worth, and respect for each other and all of that. But this isn't development, it's just infuriating. And it's like that because it constantly halts whatever the story is trying to tell by just throwing a random conflict at us right at the beginning. Anyhow, Sally reveals to Jeffrey that ever since the trio brought back the king, not only has his mental state worsened, but he seems to be going through a crystal transformation process. And since the entire village is unaware of the fact that their regal leader has returned, Sally requests that Jeffrey disposes of any rumor of the king returning until he has healed properly. Now before we go any further with this story, can I just say how incredibly unnatural this art style looks? I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but there are some very strange choices regarding the design of the characters especially. And I know I go on and on about the unnatural looking proportions of anthropomorphic animals looking like humans and such, especially with King Acorn in his World of Warcraft suit that still looks too fucking big for him. But there is something seriously wrong with some of these facial features. Some of them go from having simple small designs like the one Sonic has here on this panel, but then other times the characters have all these weird, wrinkled or overly detailed faces like Bunny or Knuckles in these two frames. Not only does it make it look jarring, it's very inconsistent with some of the other pages. Like, what's going on with Knuckles here in this frame? Did he inherit the powers of Monkey D. Luffy by eating a rubber devil fruit and decided at random to stretch his lips out? This looks really uncanny. Anyhow, Tails makes a comparison between the King's condition with that of a Chaos Emerald, and since there was no Chaos Emerald or Magic Ring to be found in the Zone of Silence, the Freedom Fighters make it their mission to search various places for untouched, untapped golden rings to see if their mysterious powers can heal the King. So Sonic and Tails head out towards the Lake of Rings, only to find it covered in a metal dome. Sonic decides to seek out the leader of the airborne Freedom Fighters, while Tails remains behind to guard the dome. Meanwhile, Dr. Robotnik announces to his second-in-command that he will be launching his brand new weapon, while he leaves Snively to the reconstruction of Robotropolis. However, dumbass that he is, Snively decides, fuck obeying the guy who holds my life on a leash, I'm gonna have these stupid robots pamper me like the bitch I am. I'm sure that disobeying your uncle, reprogramming his robots to not guard the city and reworking everything to your specific interests will surely never backfire on you by the time this story ends. So, I'll bet you're wondering why the significance between the domed Lake of Rings and the Death Egg has to do with one another, eh? Well, in a rather clever scheme set up by Dr. Robotnik, the Death Egg is part of a huge space station vessel which is constructed to collect and store as many power rings as possible. By sucking up every golden ring in various golden ring breeding locations, and with all of these golden rings hooked up inside of the Death Egg to power it, he plans to roboticize the entire Mobian world from the comfort of his own space station. This is among one of the more engaging and intimidating plans. I mean, what other dickishly dastardly plan do you have to come up with world domination? It's practically foolproof, and look at it! It has giant eyes that shoots lasers, it has little to no entrances for anyone to get into. It's a stroke of man-made genius! Sad to say though, that if Robotnik was ever competent enough to design these tubes to suck up the rings from the lake, didn't also conveniently suck up a two-tailed freedom fighter who has proven to be more than capable of defeating him, Sonic arrives at the canyon site of the supposed airborne freedom fighters, but not only does he get ambushed by a character we've never seen, known or heard from, but he bears witness to the arrival of the Death Egg in all of its copyright-infringing glory. Beginning our next story in what looks like a flashback, Robotnik completes his first phase in acquiring all of the nearby golden rings to power his Death Egg, but he reveals to his sneaky nephew that he still requires a single Chaos Emerald to power it up to maximum capacity. The same way that he wanted the Master Emerald in the video games to power the Death Egg, in this issue, apparently one Chaos Emerald is more than enough to power the world's greatest weapon. Jesus, if all of the Chaos Emeralds were gathered to power this thing, imagine if it did the same thing that Starkiller Base did in The Force Awakens. But knowing full well that Knuckles the Echidna won't be willing to give up the Emerald so quickly, he makes haste toward the island with a supposed armada of robots ready to attack. Meanwhile, Tails, who conveniently got sucked up into the giant egg in the sky, ends up in the excess baggage compartment, who also happens to stumble upon one of the disposed badniks, and then... yeah, I'm gonna call bullshit on this right here. No way am I expected to believe that mutant two-tailed fox can take control of this thing. Look at it! The design of those arms in its body are way too freaking big for him. His hand should only barely reach the tip of the elbows here. And don't tell me that this robot suit conveniently has a control pad stuck inside of its torso for Tails to control. This thing isn't a fucking Gundam, people. It's a 6-foot robot. In any case, Tails manages to sneak aboard and fool the oversized pancake him to think he's a robot. Whilst we cut to where Sonic left off, being carried off by Spider-Man's villain of the week, who I'm going to call the Vulture, because why the fuck not, as Sonic uses his bullshit cartoony physics by performing his figure 8 move to keep himself afloat while battling the Vulture. You know, in early versions of stories like The Flash and Superman, I understand it was very common ground for them to obtain all these new powers by happenstance because, Hey, they were kinda like kids' stories, and kids like to make shit up on the spot as long as it's convenient for them. But in an era where comics become more complex, engaging, and life-changing, it infuriates me how powers that once seemed practical to the character's ability and personality can now suddenly do other things because the plot demands it! In shows like The Flash, you see the superpower, but you also get a brief explanation that's informed and well detailed on how it works. Here, it's just, oh, I can use my figure 8 technique to fly. Totally legit. But you know what's funny? On the next page, Sonic actually does something more practical that actually lines itself up with the video games. He does a homing attack on the Vulture, he maneuvers and jumps between the falling debris of logs and rocks, and it makes sense for him to do this. He's demonstrated being able to move fluently like this in the opening cutscene of Sonic CD. So why arbitrarily would you make up an insignificant skill to his figure 8 technique when it's just tossed aside for a more practical ability? You're just wasting time having to set up all these panels that could have easily been used to create a fight between the Metal Kentucky Fried Chicken and the Deus Ex Hedgehog, who just trades a bunch of dull one-liners at each other. Anyhow, Sonic makes it inside of the Death Egg at the very moment Dr. Robotnik arrives at the floating island. And just as he is making his approach, Knuckles spots the Death Egg and decides to intercept it by using his dreadlocks to fly. Okay, well, at least it's been established in the games that he can fly. Even though it's more gliding than it is elevating higher into the sky, but why question even more inconsistencies? Because if the writers don't care, why the fuck should I? Eventually, Knuckles gets his near-extinct species fried by the Death Egg eye lasers, but he's saved by Mighty the Armadillo, a character who, ever since Knuckles' Chaotix, has not been seen in a long time. Speaking of the Chaotix, Espio, Vector, and Charmy arrive on the scene at the right time to witness Dr. Robotnik unleash his robot armada, which comprises of 2 Borobots. Hello? You have an entire friggin' armada of robots inside of your Death Egg. Come on, man, unleash some Death Egg robos. Bring out the SWAT bots for crying out loud. I mean, what the fuck are 2 robots going to do against the Chaotix? I mean, okay, they're looking for one of the 2 Chaos Emeralds, but has this guy not learned from his past experiences from the earlier issues? And yes, if you go back to the earliest issues of this series, Sonic and Knuckles teamed up temporarily to retrieve the stolen Chaos Emerald that Robotnik stole. And he had like twice the units and resources. I mean, I know this guy blew like, what, 10% of his resources and funding on that one project that pretty much backfired on him when Knuckles went mecha. And I know the Death Egg uses like, what, 30, maybe 35% of his resources, and it's not like his initial plan was to keep Robotropolis around for long. He plans to roboticize the entire friggin' world. Why not just convert all of his resources into building a bunch of death bots? I'm sure he could do it. And hey, these Borobots may look big to the regular human eye, but that doesn't mean shit. As soon as these guys land on the island, Knuckles and the Chaotix are all over them like fruit flies. It's no friggin' competition. You dare impede my ultimate victory by smashing my Borobots, you say, Robotnik? You're the one who put this confusingly painful plan together, and you didn't even try to take advantage of it. You're just hoping to establish a victory on a whim. Oh yeah, great fucking job for a fearless dictator. Alright. So Robotnik decides to ram his space station into the island, hoping to tip the Chaotix off, of course. With Knuckles bearing witness to the submerging of his home, his hopes lie in the fate of our 2 heroes. Okay, I know I've really been hard on this story so far, especially the fact that I've been questioning the logic and the reasoning behind how this story is structured, but we've got one more issue to complete before I go mad. I'm hoping, genuinely, I am hoping something good will happen, because for the past issues, it's been underwhelming. The Death Egg really hasn't done anything to really prove to be a threat. All it's done is crash into Angel Island in a feeble attempt to nab a Chaos Emerald using minimal strategy and infantry advantage. As established in the previous issue, Sonic manages to sneak on board and miraculously get close enough to Robotnik without tripping up a single alarm. He eventually comes across Tails in his stupid Swapbot Gundam suit, as Tails explains Robotnik's plans to Sonic in harnessing a Chaos Emerald to roboticize the world. Sonic jumps headfirst after Robotnik before being trapped in a giant glass wall, which I have to admit was quite clever of him to install. as he finally unleashes a batch of poison gas into the chamber, but not before Tails comes crashing in through the Death Egg Eye, still bullshit, and he manages to fry the controls, leaving Sonic enough time to escape from his death chamber. But it's also caused the Death Egg to spontaneously elevate at full speed toward the sky. Why the Death Egg has a function like that is beyond my reasoning and understanding, and it's at this point where we get the highlight of the issue. Ever since Robotnik learned his lesson with converting Sonic into a robot, he actually takes the designs and actually creates a more powerful machine in the form of Silver Sonic. And yeah, this is the only part of the comic I really like. It's a pretty cool reveal. It has a nice simple touch, not overly detailed like the version done by Patrick Speziante, but it's still pretty cool to look at. It's a shame this fight only lasts like 2 pages before Sonic miraculously short-circuits him using a bunch of stray-naked electrical cords. And after witnessing his newest and most underwhelmingly and, quite honestly, poor attempt at recreating a Mecha Sonic, Robotnik sets up in his new... oh, fuck me. Exoskeleton? Seriously? This is deemed worthy of a threatening name with such a goofy-looking costume? I didn't even get why the part of the suit has a metallic-like aesthetic. Wouldn't it make sense to just roboticize himself instead of putting on his CanCon 2017 costume? Oh, and remember how Tails took control of that SWAT bot so he could sneak around and surprise Robotnik? Well, guess what? Sonic happens to do the exact same thing by climbing inside, and he's piloting it just like a Gundam. I'm so tired right now, I can't even bitch about this. And as you expect, this fight is over in a few pages, it's underwhelming and boring, and again, I don't even get why this costume that Robotnik made was even supposed to accomplish. His jet boots are the only thing that give him power, the suit is just a crappy DLC packaging. So after sending Robotnik to the Great Omelette in the sky, Sonic and Tails make a break for the exit like it's Black Friday, and they manage to secure a box full of rings before departing. The Death Egg explodes, with many onlookers witnessing its underwhelmingly, disappointingly underutilized presence fading into limbo, with Sonic and Tails making a getaway to Knothole, and Robotnik making a safe landing into his converted city, now aptly named Snivopolis. Sounds like a city that a bunch of Snivy would inhabit, wouldn't it?
And there you have it, folks. That was the Sonic Quest story complete, and I think I've just said about everything that I wanted to say. There are things that I liked, things that I didn't like, and overall, I just thought it was a waste of time.
This isn't the worst of Sonic spin-off comics I've ever read. I just had a lot of expectations going in because I know so much about the Death Egg and how much of a potential threat it could be. But this is like seeing someone give a presentation in middle school who could have the most interesting thing to talk about, except he prattles on and on with unnecessary exposition and doesn't do anything to engage you with the fun or interesting stuff. Granted, I understand that this was running on a strict number of issues, and there was probably a lot of issues they had thrown about, but man, this was a missed opportunity. If I can say anything for the issues individually, I do like the cover of these comics. They actually hold a little secret with the little borders on the left. They're all designed like a Sega Genesis, Game Gear, and a Sega Saturn cartridge design.
I'm sorry if this wasn't the answer that you guys were particularly looking for the Sonic Quest story that I reviewed today, but hey, if you guys like it, that's totally cool. I'm probably just the Ebenezer Scrooge of this entire Sonic comic book series, spin-off, whatever. And, you know, you take what you get, you know, you just can't help it. Well, the Endgame Saga is about ready to go. I've just got to take some time to compile all of my notes, and then we'll finish off this 3-month marathon with a review of Sonic Boom, Fire and Ice for the 3DS. That will be a nice little way to end off this marathon, don't you think?
Before we leave though, I realize that a majority of you who come to my channel only really come here for my Sonic content, or just my comic reviews, and I want to try and keep you guys engaged with all the things that I want to talk about with this series. So starting from February the 29th, I will be releasing 2 comic book reviews per month. One video will focus on the main timeline of the series with the Sonic the Hedgehog comics, and another video will cover either a spin-off comic, a factoid video surrounding the lore, history, and characters of the franchise, or maybe I'll go back to the Mega Man comics, or hell, maybe I'll even do a random one-off comic review on a single manga issue. Maybe build up some interest for me to do an individual manga story arc review, perhaps?
Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video for today, and until next time, take care of yourselves, have a good evening, and as always, stay awesome, lovely viewers. I'll see you all next time.